Heather Lane tracked her sister's location using a phone app they shared. Every day, Catelyn checked in. Every day, the app updated. But on June 20th, 2025, the app went dark. No updates, no texts, no calls. Heather knew immediately something was wrong. 9 days later, she'd be the one to find her sister's badly decomposed body stuffed inside a padlocked green metal box buried on the mountainside of property her brother-in-law used to own. Vincent Harp had killed his 33-year-old wife, wrapped her in plastic, locked her in that box, and dumped her like garbage on land that literally bore his family's name, Harp Lane. Welcome back to Dark True Crime. Before we dive into one of Pennsylvania's most disturbing recent murders, hit that subscribe button right now. Because this case shows how a husband's inconsistent stories, surveillance footage, and cell phone data led investigators to a remote woodland grave, and how a family's determination to find answers exposed a killer who thought he'd hidden his crime perfectly. Katlyn Marie Harp was 33 years old, originally from Lewistown, Pennsylvania, living with her husband Vincent Harp in Hemlock Township, Columbia County. She was described by loved ones as someone with a bright spirit who touched lives all over the world. Catelyn had struggled with addiction and was in recovery, attending a methadone clinic regularly as part of her treatment. Her sister Heather Lane was her closest confidant, the person Catelyn talked to every single day without fail. Vincent Harp, 37, had been married to Catelyn for years. They'd lived together on property at 86 Harp Lane in Montour Township, a nearly 40-acre wooded plot in rural Columbia County. But tragedy had struck in 2023 when a fire gutted their residence on that property. The cause of the fire raised eyebrows at the time, but no charges were ever filed. By October 2023, Vincent had sold the property and moved with Catelyn to a home on Fairview Drive in Hemlock Township. On June 19, 2025, Katlyn Harp was last seen alive. That evening, she was home with Vincent. According to what he would later tell investigators, they'd gotten into an argument after dinner. He said Catelyn left around 9 to 11 p.m., and he hadn't seen her since. He claimed he woke up around 5 a.m. on June 20th and realized she wasn't home. But Catelyn's cell phone told a different story. Phone records showed Catelyn's device was at their Fairview Drive home until approximately 9:25 p.m. on June 19th. After that, it went dark. No activity, no movement, no calls or texts. The last location ping was their home. The morning of June 20th, Vincent Harp was already in motion. Cell phone tower records would later show he drove roughly an hour west to a remote mountain road near Middleburg. He arrived on Shade Mountain Road, a lightly traveled 15-mile stretch through dense woods, and his 2007 GMC Yukon SUV got stuck in the mud. If you've ever had a family member go missing and felt that immediate pit in your stomach knowing something was wrong, drop a comment below. Because Heather Lane's instincts were screaming at her that her sister was in danger. By 4 p.m. on June 20th, Heather Lane still hadn't heard from Catelyn. The app that tracked her sister's location hadn't updated all day. This wasn't like Catelyn. She called every day. She checked in. She responded to messages. Heather knew in her gut that something terrible had happened. Heather called Hemlock Township Patrolman Bradley Sharrow and asked him to check on her sister. She also called Vincent Harp directly. Vincent told Heather essentially the same story he'd later tell police. He and Catelyn had argued after dinner the night before. He didn't know where she was, he'd woken up, and she was gone. Officer Sharrow went to the Fairview Drive home to conduct a welfare check. Vincent seemed cooperative, but claimed he had no idea where Catelyn was. The officer found no signs of struggle, no obvious evidence of foul play. But Catelyn was missing, and nobody had heard from her. Meanwhile, that same day, surveillance cameras were capturing Vincent Harp's movements around Columbia County. At approximately 5:40 p.m. on June 20th, Vincent pulled into a Sunoco gas station in Danville. Video footage shows him enter the store and ask the clerk if they sold gloves. When told no, he asked if he could have a pair from the store anyway. The clerk gave him gloves, and Vincent left. Why did Vincent Harp need gloves? And why did he need them urgently enough to ask a gas station clerk for a free pair? That Sunoco station was on the route to Shade Mountain Road, the remote location where Vincent's SUV had gotten stuck in mud earlier that day. And cell phone tower records show that between 6:20 p.m. and 6:50 p.m. on June 20th, Vincent Harp returned to that exact area. Another surveillance camera, this one at the Middleburg police station, captured Vincent's vehicle at 6:50 p.m. But he wasn't driving his Yukon anymore. He was in his Silverado pickup truck. And in the bed of that truck was a large green metal box. State police would later find drag marks leading into and out of the woods near where Vincent's SUV had gotten stuck. The drag marks suggested something heavy had been pulled through that area. Something approximately the size and weight of a large metal storage container with a body inside. On June 21st, cell phone records placed Vincent Harp back in the area near Harp Lane around 10:30 a.m. He was at what would later be identified as the dump site, where Catelyn's body would be found. Later that same day, around 6 p.m., his phone pinged towers just west of Harp Lane, near the property he'd owned until selling it in October 2023. By June 23rd, Pennsylvania State Police had taken over the investigation from Hemlock Township Police. They brought Vincent Harp into the Bloomsburg barracks for an interview. And that's when his stories started falling apart. Vincent told investigators he'd been in constant communication with Catelyn via text message right up until she disappeared. He provided screenshots of those messages, but when detectives analyzed the data more carefully, they noticed inconsistencies. Vincent claimed he both did and didn't speak with a counselor on June 20th, changing his story mid-interview. He said he had his phone with him, then said he didn't, claiming he'd left it at the office. He omitted locations and interactions. His timeline kept shifting. The more he talked, the less credible his story became. On June 24th, 4 days after Catelyn disappeared, Vincent Harp sold a UTV, an off-road utility vehicle. When investigators later located that UTV and examined it forensically, they found something damning: human blood. The blood that Vincent had tried to get rid of by selling the vehicle just days after his wife vanished. For over a week, Katlyn Harp's family and friends searched desperately for her. They organized search parties, they posted on social media, they used drones, marked maps, determined which leads were true and which were false. They conducted their own investigation because, as Heather Lane would later write, "We were supposed to find her." Heather had a tracking app that showed Catelyn's location, and she used that data combined with everything she knew about Vincent's movements to narrow down possible locations. She knew about the property on Harp Lane, the land Vincent had owned until recently, and she knew that if Vincent had done something to Catelyn, he might have gone somewhere familiar, somewhere remote, somewhere he felt comfortable. On June 29th, 2025, 10 days after Catelyn disappeared, Heather Lane made the call to police. She believed she knew where her sister was. Officials rushed to the property at 86 Harp Lane in Montour Township, the wooded land Vincent had sold just months earlier after that suspicious fire destroyed their home. Deep in the woods on a mountainside, approximately 180 yards from a cliff and just slightly north of what had been Vincent's property line, they found it. A large green military-type storage container, padlocked shut. The same container that surveillance footage had shown in the back of Vincent's truck on June 20th. Make sure you're subscribed to Dark True Crime, because what investigators found when they cut that padlock and opened that metal box would confirm every horrible suspicion they had about Vincent Harp. The smell hit them first. A powerful, decomposing odor emanating from the sealed green metal box. When investigators cut through the padlock and opened that container, they found Katlyn Harp's badly decomposed remains wrapped in plastic. She'd been in that box for over a week, left to rot on a mountainside in the Pennsylvania woods. Authorities identified Catelyn by one of her distinctive tattoos. There was no doubt. This was Heather Lane's sister, the woman who'd gone missing on June 19th, the woman whose husband claimed had walked away after an argument and never come back. On Sunday, June 29th, 2025, Vincent Harp was arrested without incident and charged with criminal homicide, abuse of a corpse, and tampering with evidence. Pennsylvania State Police Trooper Anthony Petrosky called it a determined and intense investigation. But for Catelyn's family, the arrest brought no relief, only devastating confirmation that the person they'd loved and trusted had murdered Catelyn and hidden her body like she was garbage. Vincent Harp was denied bail and placed in Columbia County Prison. His preliminary hearing was set for July 14, 2025. But first, the coroner needed to determine how Catelyn had died. On Monday, June 30th, Columbia County Coroner Jeremy Reese announced that Dr. Christopher Sullivan, a forensic pathologist from Allentown, had examined Catelyn's remains. But the autopsy raised more questions than it answered. Dr. Sullivan found no evidence of gunshot wounds or penetrating trauma. There were no fractures to the extremity bones. Catelyn hadn't been shot or stabbed. Her body was in a very advanced state of decomposition, making it difficult to determine cause of death. Additional testing and toxicology reports would be necessary, and there was no estimate on how long that would take. So how had Catelyn died? And what would Vincent Harp claim happened in their home on the night of June 19th? If you've ever followed a case where the cause of death remained mysterious due to decomposition, drop a comment below. Because without clear physical trauma, prosecutors would have to rely on circumstantial evidence and Vincent's own statements to prove murder. In July 2025, Vincent Harp sat for another interview, this time from jail, and he finally offered an explanation for what happened to Catelyn. But his story raised more red flags than it explained. According to Vincent, he and Catelyn had been huffing nitrous oxide on the evening of June 19th. He claimed Catelyn put a plastic bag over her face to enhance the effects of the drug. Vincent said he passed out, and when he woke up, Catelyn was dead in their bed next to him. Vincent told investigators he panicked. Instead of calling 911, instead of reporting his wife's death, he decided to hide her body. He went to their yard and retrieved the large green metal storage box they'd been using for outdoor equipment. He put Catelyn's body inside the box, wrapped in plastic, and locked it with a padlock. Then, Vincent claimed he drove around trying to figure out what to do. He went to Danville, then to Snyder County, before ultimately deciding to take the box to the property on Harp Lane that he'd owned until October 2023. According to Vincent, Catelyn had told him she wanted to be buried there. It was her final wish, he claimed, to be laid to rest on that land. During his preliminary hearing, as Vincent was walked out of the Columbia County Courthouse, he spoke to reporters. Just 4 words: the drugs killed her. That was Vincent's defense. Catelyn had accidentally killed herself while getting high, and he'd panicked and hidden her body. He wasn't a murderer. He was just a husband who'd made terrible decisions in the aftermath of a tragic accident. But prosecutors and Catelyn's family didn't buy it. If Catelyn had truly died accidentally, why hide her body? Why not call 911? Why lie to police for over a week? Why sell the UTV with her blood on it? Why return to the dump site multiple times? Why ask a gas station clerk for gloves before retrieving Catelyn's body? Every action Vincent took after Catelyn's death suggested consciousness of guilt. He knew he'd done something criminal, and he was trying to cover it up. The elaborate disposal of Catelyn's body, the lies to police, the inconsistent stories, all pointed to murder, not panic after an accidental death. Judge presiding over the preliminary hearing found sufficient evidence to send all charges against Vincent Harp to trial. He would face a jury on charges of criminal homicide, abuse of a corpse, and tampering with evidence. Vincent remained in custody without bail, awaiting trial. The community of Columbia County was shaken by Catelyn's murder. This quiet rural area northeast of Harrisburg wasn't accustomed to such violent crimes. The idea that a man would kill his wife and bury her on property that bore his family's name seemed almost incomprehensible. But Vincent Harp's actions fit a pattern seen in many domestic homicide cases. The argument on June 19th, whatever it was about, had apparently been the catalyst. Maybe Catelyn threatened to leave. Maybe she confronted him about something. Maybe the stress of her recovery from addiction created tension. We may never know exactly what triggered Vincent's violence. What we do know is that Vincent had means and opportunity. He had the privacy of their home. He had access to the remote property where Catelyn's body would be found. He had vehicles to transport her remains. And he had just enough knowledge to think he could get away with it. But Vincent made critical mistakes. He didn't account for Heather Lane's tracking app and her determination to find her sister. He didn't realize that selling the UTV would lead investigators directly to evidence of Catelyn's blood. He didn't anticipate that surveillance cameras would capture his movements with the metal box. And he didn't expect that his own cell phone would betray his locations, placing him at the dump site multiple times. As this case awaits trial, Catelyn's family continues to grieve and advocate for justice. Heather Lane has been vocal on social media, sharing her sister's story and pushing for accountability. She wrote about how the family and friends had to conduct their own investigation because they were supposed to find her. That haunting statement speaks to both Heather's determination and her heartbreak that Catelyn wasn't found alive. There is a bigger picture to this, Heather wrote after Catelyn was found. Catelyn has made a huge impact all over the world, more than any of us could have imagined. It's a shame we had to lose her, but God had a plan, and this to mean something. The property at 86 Harp Lane, where Catelyn's body was found, has taken on an eerie significance. Vincent owned that land until the fire in 2023 destroyed their home there. The circumstances of that fire were never fully explained. But looking back now, some wonder if there were other secrets buried on that property, other incidents that went uninvestigated. The fact that Vincent chose to dump Catelyn's body on land he'd recently owned suggests either arrogance or desperation. Did he think nobody would search there because he'd sold the property? Did he feel some ownership over that land even after the sale? Or was it simply the most remote, familiar location where he thought a body could remain hidden indefinitely? Make sure you're subscribed to Dark True Crime, because as this case proceeds to trial, we'll be following the developments. The toxicology results, the forensic evidence, and Vincent Harp's claims about accidental death will all be examined by a jury who will decide whether he murdered his wife or whether his story about a tragic accident has any credibility. Until then, this case serves as a reminder that domestic violence and homicide often hide behind closed doors. Catelyn's recovery from addiction, her close relationship with her sister, her daily check-ins, none of that was enough to protect her from violence in her own home. If you or someone you know is experiencing domestic violence, please reach out for help. The National Domestic Violence Hotline in the U.S. is 1-800-799-7233. In Pennsylvania, you can contact the Pennsylvania Coalition Against Domestic Violence at 1-800-537-2238. Don't wait until it's too late. Katlyn Harp was 33 years old when she died. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend. She was in recovery, fighting to build a better life for herself. She had people who loved her and checked on her every single day. And on June 19, 2025, her life was taken from her, allegedly by the person who was supposed to love and protect her most. Her body was stuffed in a metal box, padlocked shut, and dumped on a mountainside like garbage. She was left to decompose for over a week while her family searched desperately, while Vincent Harp lied to investigators, while he sold evidence and tried to cover his tracks. But Catelyn's sister Heather refused to give up. She used every tool available, tracked every lead, and ultimately found her sister's body on the very land Vincent thought was the perfect hiding place. Heather's determination ensured Catelyn wouldn't become another cold case, another missing person who disappeared without answers. Vincent Harp is awaiting trial in Columbia County Prison. The evidence against him is substantial. Cell phone records placing him at the dump site, surveillance footage showing him transporting the metal box, blood on the UTV he sold, his inconsistent statements to police, and most damning of all, his elaborate efforts to hide Catelyn's death rather than report it. Whether a jury believes his story about accidental nitrous oxide death and panic-induced body disposal, or whether they convict him of murder, remains to be seen. But one thing is certain, Katlyn Harp deserved better than being buried on her husband's former property, locked in a box, hidden away like a shameful secret. Thank you for watching. Stay safe, check in on your loved ones regularly, and remember that addiction recovery is a journey that requires support and understanding, not judgment or violence. I'll see you in the next video.